Hello, fellow entomology students. Um, my name is Josiah, and this is my video on pesticides. Insects are important. We know they're important. They literally shape our whole world for the most part, and we know this in large part thanks to our class that we're in, entomology. Who would have guessed? But um, insects are the main cause of one of the most controversial and touchy topics in today's political climate. That being pesticides. Now, whether you realize it or not, we eat food that in one way or another has been covered or treated with pesticides and insecticides. In fact, like 75% of organic produce is not only treated with pesticides, but still has high traces of it, which means basically all produce has been treated at one point with insecticides or pesticides. They still have traces of it when they're sold to the public. When we eat food, it's laced with chemicals that are meant to kill things, so it's probably not good for us. Maybe a couple of you are thinking, oh, well, that's not me because I buy organic produce. Well, that don't matter because organic produce is still, there's been studies done where they still have residue of pesticides on them, which means they still use pesticides for organic produce. So it's you can't escape it. Everybody ingests pesticides one way or another. Now, for one reason or another, there's 12 particular plants that we eat called the Dirty Dozen that have the highest amount of pesticide residue left on them when they are sold to the public. And these are strawberries, spinach, kale, collard and mustard greens, peaches, pears, nectarines, apples, grapes, and bells/hot peppers, cherries, blueberries, and green beans. So if you eat any of those, which a lot of people do, those are like some of the, most common fruits and vegetables that people eat. So we're all just screwed, basically, is what I'm saying. Nobody wins. So, you might be asking yourself, why do we even have pesticides? Like, what's the purpose? And it's to get rid of pests, as you might have been able to put together. A lot of rodents eat plants, eat crops. A lot of diseases spread throughout crops, and even other plants that are considered weeds steal the nutrients from crops. But the thing that pushed us the most in creating pesticides are insects. Okay, so we've established, there's pesticides everywhere, but why are they even bad though? What really happens when we consume pesticides? Well, we're gonna get into that later, so chill out. But let's start at the beginning. So the first evidence of pest control is people in ancient times burning their crops after they harvest them to kill and deter pests. Pretty simple. There's bugs in our crops, just burn them. Smoke them out, burn them alive. Do what you gotta do. The next major instance of this, or at least I should say an evolution of this idea, is in 300 AD, Chinese farmers actually bred really aggressive predatory ants to kill other insects that threaten the crops, which I think is really cool. And that's an instance of domesticating a species that we don't even really talk about. And in these early days, people use insects and other more natural ways to get rid of pests because they didn't really have a choice at that point in time. That's all they could do. And keep this in mind when we talk about, possible alternatives to pesticides. And, now as the population started growing and people needed more food, these solutions weren't enough. They just weren't. So the first form of pesticides, as the way we think of it, as a chemical, a compound of some sort, started when people started spreading lead and arsenic over crops to kill the insects. And I don't know, you don't need to be a chem major to know that lead isn't really good for you. Arsenic is in that same boat. So yeah, they kill the yeah, they kill the insects, but they weren't really good for the people that ate them either. So after years of trying to innovate new ways to protect these crops, the invention of chemical pesticides it started what we're going to consider for the purposes of this video like the modern age of pesticides. Okay, so now we understand what pesticides are, right? We got the groundwork done. Now, how does this really affect us? How much do we use each year? It's a question that I had while writing this, and turns out we shower like 5 billion pounds of pesticides on the planet yearly, which is absolutely insane. In 1948, Paul Muller was awarded the Nobel Prize for the discovery of dichlorodephinitive, this word, or DDT, as we're going to be calling it. This was super incredibly effective at killing many species of insects until the 50s, like 2 years later, when insects became really resistant to DDT. Another issue of this chemical was really harsh on wildlife other than pests, like birds, especially birds. It poisoned water sources that our food used, that we used, and it has long-term effects on people's health. Now, it turns out it only took like 24 years before DDT was banned in the US altogether, and even then, traces are still around, and it's still having an effect on the environment. Pesticides aren't only bad for like the environment and humans and other animals, they don't even really work a lot of times. One of the main problems with pesticides is insect evolution, I guess you could call it. Like let's say you kill a batch of insects, only the most resistant insects are going to survive, and once they breed, they make even more resistant offspring, and the cycle just continues until the chemical compound isn't even affected anymore. And this is even harmful to insects in a sort of like counterintuitive way. Like, yeah, the point of insecticides are to kill insects, duh. But there are a lot of insects that either eat pests, take care of pests, or pollinate the crops, such as bees, which is something that we talk about a lot in this class. So you know how important they are. If you are interested in the effects on bees, like there's this one article that I'll show on the screen right now that talks about rapid bee population decline in the winter due to pesticides. There's another article showing how even disposing of pesticides is insanely bad for the environment. Now, art is something that reflects the ideas and the opinions of people at any given point in time really well. So here's some art pieces that have to do with pesticides if you were interested in something like that at all. Okay, so with all that being said, something you might be asking, like including me at this point, why do we even use pesticides, right? Like, what do we gain? They're not good for like anybody, any party included. It's just bad. Well, the answer is we really just don't have a choice. Like, yeah, it's bad. It's not super efficient, but it's kind of the best thing we have against insects right now, because insects could actually decimate our food supply. They've done it before, they'll do it again. It's not really insect related, but the potato famine, that was crazy. And people don't want that again. This is not good. So what's the alternative? Well, scientists have been looking into like using fungus as a way to deter other insects, as a way to deter and kill and eat pests. Similar to the ant example that we had at the beginning of the video. A lesser solution is like using drones to spray pesticides instead of just like mass spraying the whole field, and more like selectively targeting the crops, which would be better, but still not perfect. I personally like the fungus and the using other insects solution, because I just feel like it's the least environmentally damning way. And it's not even an environment thing, like it is obviously, but it's hurting people, it's hurting animals, it's hurting the water that we we drink. It's hurting insects that we don't need to be hurt. It's just all around not bad. So thank you for coming to my TED Talk. I'm in your backyard.